Welcome to another tutorial on advanced data wraps. This time we will build a simple calculator. We will not do much of scripting. Actually, we will do a single line and some calls. But you don't have to use scripting to build even very complex data applications to handle lists and all that. So furthermore, tutorials will show you that. But for now, we stay with without data relations, without any complex data interaction, just with a simple form kind of approach. But this form should be a simple calculator. So what we want to build is something what we see here. We got one number, we got another number, and we got an operator, and we got a button. And the button should actually give us the result, which is calculate 1 plus 2 equals 3. So when we change the values here, we press calculate again, it will calculate it. So that's all what we want to do, but we also can say multiply or divide, and we get the proper result. This will be the thing we are building now together. Starting from an empty page here, what we need, of course, is we need to put our base in here. And now we have two numbers, we have an operator, and we have a result. So we need a couple of input fields. And for the sake of doing a better design, we will actually put the table in here. And as we saw in the example, we will also have something like a nice headline showing us showing an overview. So we don't have to use only the advanced data wraps elements in here. We can also go for the standard ones. And mix standard items together with the data binding items. I don't have the ability to access the data from the standard items, but for a headline, for example, I'm totally fine to do that. So in the table item here now, we have to add several inputs. So we got 1, we got 2, and we got 3. We go to item number 1. And then we say we want to create a new variable, and I call my first value first. And the memory value should be whatever, 1. So that's the initial value which this item will get. The second one we want to have an operator. So we go for a new variable. And so the name is operator. And the memory value, let's start with a plus. So plus is a good starting point. But for even more ease of usability, I will actually go for select here. And select allows me to pick values from a data relation. We will talk about that in later tutorials. But we also can go for custom values. And so I can simply add new values here. So let me just add plus, add a new value minus, add a new value multiply, and divide. So the ones that are already in here, I can by the way sort them and change the order, but I can also remove them, so we don't need them. So we have a simple selector here for our operator. The third box will be, again, not from the database, just a variable, and we call it second parameter here, and we put a 2 in there, just like in our example. So now we need the result. And the result, we will go for a new variable again, and we call this result. And the memory value would be something like not set, because we don't have a result, since we also want to have a button which should do the math, the operation. So let's put a button in here. And this button is now set to submit. But the button has an on-click selector here, and it has more to offer than just submitting. You can actually execute your own JavaScript code, and you also have a lot of comprehensive actions for dealing with data relations, which I will show you later on in a tutorial. So what we will now, since I mentioned we do some coding, we say this button should execute JavaScript code. And it gives you kind of a little example here about setting values and reading values. Reading values just means always that you put 2 brackets behind them. If you want to set them, you put the new value inside these brackets. So let's just do that. So what we want to do is we want to do the calculations which we have here. which means we can just take what we have and do the dirty trick of JavaScript and simply let JavaScript do the computation here. So what we need to do is we want to actually set our result. So let me just do the use the IntelliSense. Sometimes when you don't get IntelliSense, which can happen, so you don't have any values and you wonder why, just deselect, select it again. It will mostly do the job, because then some refresh needs to take place, and I was a little bit too fast. So we got result. This is our result, and I want to set the result. So I, for example, can set the result to 111. So when I do so, let me leave it like this, and when I click on execute, it puts 111 in the result variable, which is automatically shown because this text box is not only defining, but it's also displaying the result variable, which makes it very handy. So that's what happens behind the scenes. So what we want to do now is we want to actually do the math. So what we do is we call eval, which evaluates a JavaScript term, and then we simply give them all the values. So we got our first value, and we got our operator. So we just build a string here, and so 1 plus second value is our second. So let's just press execute, and we got 3. And if we do multiply, we should get 2. Perfect. So that's our small calculator. The layout is not so nice, so I will show you how we can use the amazing table item to do this in a nicer and a better layout. So what we want is we want to have actually we want to have 4 columns here on tablet. So let's say this could stay to 1FR. The operator is very small, so let me make this just 50 pixel. And then we got a second one. And I don't like that we don't have some indicator here. So let me just put another text item before the result and just put an equal sign in here, which means that we end up now with 5 columns. Let me see that we are really in the tablet mode here. So So why does it look a little bit weird? Because to make form building easy, which I showed you before, this text here is automatically placed in column 1, which makes it extremely easy when you build a form. But in that case, it's not what we want to have. So we put this to auto, so it goes there. Again, back to our table, and the 4th column we have only the equal in here, so we make it smaller, maybe also 20 pixel. So, and now we got the 5th column, which is the result. That's fine. Our button now should go to column number 5, which is perfect. So now we can click it, and it looks pretty much like our calculator before. So let's have a little look at the layout, because this looks good and it works, but if we do it on mobile, it doesn't work at all. So first of all, the base item itself, it's a vertical group. So what we can do is we have it already set to top center. So what we should do is the headline set not 100%, but to auto, so we have it centered. That's fine. But now the problem is with the grid. So that's beautiful on tablet and desktop, but it's absolutely awful on mobile. So what we can do is we can set mobile to only 2 columns. So you will wonder why we have more columns than 2 here. That's because the text box, for example, or what the JavaScript code button here, we set to column 5. So even if the table has only 2 columns defined for mobile, when I deliberately say I want to have column 5, that extends the table to 5 columns. So you actually have 2 ways of influencing the amount of columns. So the things should match. So what we can do is, and now that's quite amazing, is we can, for each of the items, we can define how they should look on mobile and tablet. So let's go and just add one more of the sections here. So tablet stays like it is, but this first value we want to have in column 2 for mobile. So go to our operator, do the same thing, and say place it in column 1 for mobile. And then we go to the second thing, which is fine, we can leave it. Now go to the equal sign. Add one and say the equal sign we want to have in column 1 on mobile, and we want to horizontally align it to the right so that the equal sign just is adjacent to the box. So the text box is fine, and the execute button we want to have differently on mobile, and we want to have it on column 2. So the only thing that doesn't look so well is that these columns are equal, which I can simply change by going in the columns here and going to 50 pixel again. So now I got a beautiful calculator which works on mobile, which still keeps the layout on tablet. That's amazing. Good example about how that table can help you do adjust form designs for different devices. And we also did some scripting. To close this tutorial, I want to show you another way, another thing, because this is good that we can press execute, we can change values, we could do what we learned, what we already learned. We could add validation here so that only numeric values are allowed. All that, it's possible. But you might want to think that it would be greater if when I'm entering a value here that I get the result automatically. The problem is, it's actually not a big problem because we do have the code. So in the JavaScript button, we have the code. So let's just copy that code and then go to the second value text box. And what you will find here are two options. You have an on-change script and an after-change script. I would say using the on-change script just very, very carefully. It can be very handy to update other values, but what I would like to do right now is to use the after-change script. So it comes with an alert. So let me just change something here. And you see that this alert is immediately triggered. So what we can do now, we can just paste our script in here. Because after change means that these values are all set. We don't have to deal with things like new value, old value. We just can use the values as we used to them. So if I start typing numbers, I get the calculation immediately. But if I remove all the numbers, I get a script error because actually our script is not valid, which we're trying to execute here. So what we can do to avoid this is simply encapsulate this result assignment here into a try-catch block, and then so that we actually don't have an error, so we don't have to handle it. So when we now go in here, we still can write something, but if this is not valid, it will not change our result. So maybe that's not what we want, but we also could do something like in our result box, we can say result invalid. Just go in here, remove that, we got invalid. And now, very good example here. So let me get from one to more details. It might be great if that could be red, because invalid is not like a number, it's not a real result. So we might would like to have this red. So going to the text box, we will find for all of the advanced data elements, we will find two more features. The one is data controlled CSS, the other is data controlled visibility. Data controlled CSS is the thing we are using. Data controlled visibility is the same thing like the visible item, just on a per item level. Let's say we pick any property. So we got all the CSS properties here where we can set programmatically, and then we have the same way of setting something like we do have in the text item, for example. So we can say we want to set this to red. So whatever we're doing here, we will get this red now. But this is not what we want. We only want to have it red if it's invalid. So going back and say, and now we can actually do some again, to some minor low-code scripting and ask ourselves is result, so let's use the IntelliSense, if result equals invalid, I think I wrote it with a capital I, doesn't I? So we actually, if that is our comparison, so depending on what's the result, then we want to actually export, give the color, set the color to red, or we just leave the color black. So when we do so, and we enter a number here, we got the result. But if we are pressing space or something invalid here, we actually got the invalid, which is pretty nice. The problem is now that we have 2 times the same script. So once is the after change script here, which is now different from the script we have in our execute button. And if this gets a little bit more complex, you might not want to have that. So there's a very nice way of avoiding that. When I take this script off here and copy it, I can go to the database, to the base item here, and I can tell the base item that I want to add a JavaScript function, which is now a global function accessible from everywhere. So my function name would be calculate. Okay, and I paste in. I just paste the code in that we have. So that's fine. What I can do now, I can go to my JavaScript button here, for example, and say Control space. And if I scroll down to the root elements, so they're all starting with root, these are my global functions. I have a new function calculate, so I can simply call them. The same thing I can do after change of my text item. We can actually do the same thing. We can call root calculate. And we can do this also in the text box on an after change script event, and we can say call this function. So now, no matter what I'm doing, if I enter a value here, I got the result. If I change this value, I got a result. So wherever I'm doing something, I'm actually getting that. And I'm also can press execute still, which I simply don't need because the result is always up to date. One other thing is that I'm able to modify the result here, which is not what we intended to be, because this is a result that should be calculated, so we don't want to access it. So what we can do is we can also go down here and we find a disable input button. So when we disable the input, we can select between always disabled, always enabled, or we can also set a condition, a simple condition, or JavaScript code. So now it's disabled, I can't type in here, but when I type something in here, I get that value calculated. So thanks again for listening. That was part 3 of our Advanced Data Apps tutorial series.